great to hear the buzz in the room. My attention has been drawn to this piece of paper that you'll find in your packs, and if you wanted to actually jot down any of those reflections you've just had, there's a lovely space for that, so you can do it while it's still in your mind if you would like to do that. And I'd like to just finish by drawing your attention to just 3 resources that I found very useful. The first is a DVD from Dying Matters that's aimed very much at general practice. It's called How Long Have I Got, Doc? Really good for training for initiating conversations about end-of-life issues. So it's got 6 different scenarios with questions alongside. Really good just to run in your practice if people are interested. I really recommend that. The second one is called The Conversation Game. It's a pack of cards produced by Conversations for Life, who are based up in Cumbria, and it can be used just to help start conversations about end-of-life issues. Difficult to do in a short consultation, but maybe within another setting where you've got a bit more time. It could be used by carers having chats, advanced care planning within care homes maybe. Do feel free to have a look at the cards. I'm not going to explain how it works here and now, but it's very straightforward and very thought-provoking. And finally, you've probably all heard of Atul Gawande's book Being Mortal, but if you haven't, buy it. It's in paperback now, so it's a bit cheaper, and read it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jo and Pippa. I think that was quite an incredible talk, where you've given certainly me, and I hope the rest of you, a very clear framework to now be able to work with when we are thinking about opening conversations with our patients. And also personally as well, I think we're all of an age where we're facing difficult situations in our own lives as well. We'll circulate the slides so you'll have time to digest this, have a look at it. I certainly will be printing some of this off and having it on my wall in the consulting room, but we will circulate the slides if that's all right with your permission, so that you can have time to digest this and reflect on it in your own time. I just wondered, we've just got a couple of minutes before our next speaker, if there's a few burning questions anybody has for Jo or Pippa. We will have a bit of a Q&A at the end of the breakout sessions as well. But if you did have a couple of questions now, we'd be happy to field a few questions.
Sorry, Bob, can I just point to people on the table? There's the blue bit of paper about managing different conversations of life, which is the CJ training programme. So do have a look at that.
Thank you. Anybody have any particular questions for Jo or Pippa?
Do you mind introducing yourself as well? Thank you.
Dr. Helena Sagan, I'm a GP. I wondered if you could just repeat the questions that you suggested.
Certainly.
Were helpful.
Yeah. Okay.
So a quick run through of the questions that you can use as openers, in no particular order. What's the main thing on your mind? What's your understanding of your health? What are your fears and worries for the future? What matters most to you? What are your priorities? That's it.
I think the thing is, as a GP, as you were describing there, the case study where the patient gave you that opening, gave you that permission to talk, and Scott Murray talks about this, how patients will often they expect us to lead the conversation when the time's right, and it's quite rare sometimes for patients to lead the conversation. But sometimes you will get that opener, or you'll get that trigger event, such as they've just come out of hospital, having had an unplanned admission, or they may have been admitted to a care home, they may have had a recent fall, a recent bereavement, and there's lots of different occasions where you may get that opening, and as you say, the door may open and it may close, but it wasn't necessarily the wrong decision to try and start the conversation, and that may then sow a seed that can then evolve and they may come back to you at a later date having thought about what was initially said. And it is a conversation that evolves, and I think as GPs we're often frightened, the 10 minutes in the back of our head, the next patient sitting in the waiting room, but if we don't take that chance to open the door, then we leave the rest of it to chance. And is that fair? And Scott Murray said, patients will often say when they say how long have I got, as you said, sometimes what they're actually meaning is what's going to happen, and that's what they want to talk about. So I think whenever we get that chance, we should really try and take it, if at all possible. Any other questions? Thank you.
Sorry, can I hand you the microphone? If you just quickly introduce yourself.
I'm Sue Cullen, I'm a gastroenterologist. One of the issues we have in the hospital is that we have patients who have to have a DNAR decision when they come in through the door, despite the fact we're not expecting them to die during their admission. Have you got any tips on how we talk to people who are frail and elderly and clearly shouldn't be for resuscitation, but actually they've just come in with a bit of cellulitis?
That's a really difficult one. And is it something you might be covering, Fiona, a little in your talk later? Yes. Yeah. It's very difficult. I think you have to be completely honest with them about why you're doing it, because as you say, there's probably very little chance it'll come to that, but the laws say that you have to have it done. So I think being very honest about the reason for it, and then just talking them through the reality of it, I think it's very hard.
It's quite frightening, I think, for some people.
I'm sure it is, but I think giving people a chance to express their fears and ask their questions rather than having it only half done, and involving those close to them, if that's at all possible, to avoid misconceptions afterwards, is also ideal. To get the ideal circumstances is not always easy.
I'd just like to add something to that, because different situation and similarly difficult. When my mother went into a residential care home, she was asked to complete a whole lot of forms, including what would happen in the event of her death. So before she'd stepped foot through the door, she was being asked about how she would leave, because it was clear that she was going to stay there for the rest of her natural life. So I think these situations do crop up in different places, in different ways, and I would echo Joe in saying, actually, yes, this is a piece of administration, and we know it's difficult, and we may need to talk about more of this, or it may be perfectly obvious to some people. So there aren't easy answers. I sometimes think that there's a cultural British stiff upper lip that makes it harder for us than it would be if we had a natural tendency to just be straightforward about it.
We'll take one final question from the back.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes, you mentioned a lot of good scenarios, but there are also the deniers and the very difficult scenarios where it takes a huge amount of effort to get any sort of engagement at all, and things are likely to not go very well because you just can't get anywhere. So you have to sort of address, I don't know if that's coming later.
No, I'm very aware that I didn't really address that, and thank you for pointing it out. A conversation is a two-way thing. If the other person doesn't want to engage, then you can't. And it is very, very difficult. Now, you may well be able to engage with those close to them. So, for example, I had a patient, a man who was in his 50s, who could not speak about his imminent demise due to cancer. The wife could see it coming, was really frustrated. She couldn't have the conversations with her husband. I was a third party with whom she could have the conversations, but there is no way you're going to make somebody. It is difficult. You can only do what you can do, and you can keep giving people opportunities, and don't give up on giving opportunities, but you can't make them converse about something that they do not want to do. But supporting those around them and acknowledging that it's really, really difficult, I think is important. Pippa, anything to add? No.